Hi, I'm Chris, and today we're reviewing the new August Burns Red album, Guardians. August Burns Red is a metalcore band from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it's important to point out that at this point, this band has been around for 17 years, coming up along the likes of As I Lay Dying and Parkway Drive, and it's honestly impressive just how fully formed their sound was from their very first album. Seriously, go listen to that album, Thrill Seeker, after listening to this one, and there will be no doubt in your mind that you were listening to the same band, despite the fact that they didn't even have the same lineup at that point. And it's clear that part of the reason why this band has had such staying power is because they and their contemporaries essentially wrote the book on how to perform and write the style of metalcore that dominated the late 2000s, with many of the bands that cropped up during that period of time essentially mimicking their sound and then watering it down with catchy choruses. Not that there's anything wrong with a catchy chorus. But in the case of this record, the band's consistency proves to be both a blessing and a curse, as fans will doubtless be pleased with this latest offering, but partly due to the fact that it offers few new ideas. Now, don't get me wrong, this is definitely an enjoyable record. But my main criticism is that it feels fairly indistinct from the records that the band has released in the past, and that opinion actually trickles down to the micro level, with many of the songs on this album feeling fairly similar to one another. But before I proceed with criticism, I will give a bit of praise, that being that both the drums and the lead guitar on this album are both absolutely killer, with the drums being super frantic and unpredictable most of the time, but also smartly measured when the music needs them to be, and the lead guitars absolutely soaring and eliciting all sorts of emotions from the listener as they change from sounding very malevolent to almost angelic and exciting to just going along with what the genty rhythm guitar is doing and feeling incredibly aggressive and energetic. And to say that again in a much simpler and more direct way, both the drums and the lead guitar are written and performed with a high degree of technical ability, but also with an incredibly thorough and effective consideration of what works in the context of the music and how the listener is going to perceive what they're performing. Additionally, while the screams on these tracks don't have quite my favorite vocal timbre, Jake Lurs is clearly performing them with a high degree of consideration for safe and effective vocal technique and is modulating his screams to match the intensity of the rest of the music. So ultimately, there is nothing to complain about there. Also, on the topic of vocals, I have to say that I do think that they were mixed a little bit quietly, which doesn't quite help my distaste with Jake Lur's vocal timbre. Additionally, I was mildly annoyed by the way that the bass would get lost in the mix, with the sole exception of during the dropouts, but other than that, the production on this record is passable. Returning to my original and largest criticism, I can't help but feel that this album is fairly indistinct from their broader catalog, more of a piece made for the fans than for a broader musical audience. Yes, the riffs and breakdowns are brutal, but none of them feel special, either sounding exactly like what I hear in my head when I think about what a breakdown sounds like, or otherwise not leaving very much of a lasting impression on me at all. But the excellently written leads and the incredibly loud, frenetic drums very often tee the listener up to really feel it when the heaviest parts hit, leaving most of this album fairly enjoyable, unless you're the sort of listener that is automatically offended if something sounds recycled. Additionally, my personal level of enjoyment while listening to this record was level all the way through, so a listener doesn't have to worry about any drop-offs in the back half of the album in terms of quality. One specific point I want to bring up before I conclude is that there's a 30-minute section, it's a dropout, in the song Lighthouse, in which the band suddenly converts themselves into being as an ocean. And I only bring it up because they sound so uncannily like being as an ocean that I just thought it would be interesting to discuss if anybody has any opinions on that. And altogether, this is an incredibly solid album, but a fairly indistinct one. So on a 1 to 10 scale, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. And with that, see ya.